Scions of the Southland for Sunday, October 6th, 2024. Welcome to your weekly recap of Georgia Tech numbers and words. My name is Akshay Easwaran, and joining me on this beautiful day in Atlanta, Georgia, are Jack Purdy and Jake Grant. Gentlemen, how are you feeling? The city of Atlanta undefeated in football this week. It feels great, honestly. I feel great.
I like it. We had a great day tailgating yesterday. We've had a nice after 2 weeks ago where we had a very wet tailgate. This was yesterday was very fun on campus. I think there was the alumni band was out as well, which had its own nice bits. It was just it was a solid day. Perfect temperature. Just sit back, watch the absolute mayhem unfold across the country. I did not stay up for the Calgorithms' eventual loss.
Oh,
But
buddy, that one
I went
is
to
that
bed at
one's tough.
35:10. I was like, it's 1 in the morning. Good night.
yep, yep.
Whoops.
And then Miami puts up 25 straight to win the game. So,
Um, no, it was a great day on campus. I didn't plan to mention this, but you mentioned the alumni band, and I really was confused for a second why they had like Duke blue, like toned flags. So maybe we buy them some white or some gold ones, but it was great to have them. I'm a sucker for the band and to have them with another 150 people rules for the sound and the effects.
Oh yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Well, we've already sort of talked about football. So, how about we dive right into Georgia Tech's latest football game, a 24-14 victory over previously undefeated Duke. Duke notably played no one, including
UConn,
North Carolina, which we will
the
discuss
Lake Michigan
later.
Stadium.
Jack, walk me through the drive timeline of this game, please.
Yes, we had a great first drive touchdown, courtesy of of what is now a customary Zach Pyron run up the gut for a yard or two to make it 7-0 for like his fourth or fifth touchdown. He's somewhere up there. He's got a lot of touchdowns now. Duke was held scoreless in their first two drives, which is looking nice. We really should have been up 14-0 after a early second quarter drive for us where we had third and goal from the 6, but Haynes King overthrew Chase Lane and landed, I think, in the seats. Nonetheless, Aiden Bird made the field goal, made it 10-0 halfway through the second. Of note, JJ Vandenberg, he might show up as Jordan Vandenberg on the roster, but he goes by JJ. He got his first start of the year. Coach Key calls him the strongest guy on the team and possibly one of the strongest in the country. This man got a sack, which was big to help force a punt to quell Duke's momentum, and he had some other good tackles for losses throughout the day. Duke's next drive, so we're talking late second quarter here. They had what seemed like a phantom defensive pass interference call against us. I forgot if it was Burrell or Harvey that got called
Hmm.
on. Our guy turned around, played the ball, did not play the receiver, and now that we did get a nice DPI call earlier when we were on offense, so could have been a makeup call. Either way, it was not a legitimate defensive pass interference in the moment. Um, but that was also after we were called on a defensive delay of game on a punt, which was after the 2 minute warning, which meant we went to commercial, and then somehow we're still not. I don't know honestly, I do not know how defensive delay of game works. Duke got called on one throughout the game too, but it turned a 4th and 8 from like the 48 to a 4th and 3 from like the 43 ish. My numbers are maybe right there. I don't know. Jake, I know you're about to say something, but it completely flipped the drive from where Duke was going to be punting again. We were going to bleed out the clock, and then Duke had brand new life, and they turned it into a touchdown. Jake, what are you about to say here?
I think I said this after the Louisville game, and it may not have been on record. It may have been when we were just chatting, or maybe it was to my brother. I don't know. Time flies. That was 2 weeks ago. That might as well have been in 2019. The defensive delay of game happening twice, and yet I can't even remember it happening like once
Right.
ever. And I watch a decent amount of football, or at least in live games.
Yeah.
You sometimes check out if you're not watching a game of a team that you are super invested
Right.
in. If
Right.
you catch my drift, so I'm sure I've seen it before. But the fact that it happened twice for the second game around, I was like, that's weird. But
It's
also of note on that DPI, I believe that would have been a pick as well. So
Oh, that's
uh,
right. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it
That
wiped a
was
pick
yeah.
off the board and gave them a fresh set of down,
That's right. That's
15
right.
yard and all that. So
It did.
an important added piece on top of
Yes.
that.
Good point. Good point. And that touchdown they got on by Pan call was the exact same kind of crossing route that killed us against Louisville. Thankfully, that was the only time in the game that killed us on that route. Um, Duke did get the ball first in the second half, but we stopped them from getting the double possession scores, which was very nice. But we had to do so on a 4th and inches where they slipped up and Trinilius Tatum made a tackle. So thankfully did not get a get them to score there. We though did not make any use of the 4th down turnover where Duke on a 65-yard pass got a touchdown on their first play on their 7th drive, made it 14-10 Blue Devils with 2:53 left in the third quarter. We punched back immediately, though. This is where Chad Alexander comes into play. He had a few great runs in this drive and the next drive. Set up a Jamal Haynes 4-yard touchdown catch. We did have a couple 4th downs we had to convert here. We were 3 for 3 throughout the game. So when we did get in the situation, we were pretty successful and had good play calls for it. Nonetheless, 17-14 lead in the fourth quarter. We force a punt. Alexander again gets some good runs, and Singleton gets a 4-yard catch to make it 24-14 with about 3-ish minutes to go, or 5-ish, I think. And then Duke misses a 46-yard field goal down 10, needing to just get a field goal and a touchdown with 3-ish minutes to go, and we get the necessary 1st downs. Amari Harvey gets a last-second pick as Duke has the ball with like 20 seconds left, and they're just kind of just throwing Hail Marys. So he gets one on the stat sheet, but nonetheless, 24-14 win. We're 4-2 on the year, 2-2 in ACC play.
A couple of notes from my end as you were talking, Jack. Which one did I pull up here? The 4th-and-1 in the third quarter for Duke. That was a really good go decision from.
Oh yeah.
Also, while I'm on the topic, Duke head coach Manny Diaz. Did anyone else forget that Manny Diaz got hired at Duke? Or am I the only one?
We were very aware of
No,
this.
I was very aware because the whole
Okay.
Mac Brown, Manny Diaz beef narrative from last week,
Okay.
Maybe
I've just
DC,
checked out.
Texas. Yeah.
Maybe I've just checked out hard, but that was just a really good go call at a time where you probably needed it. And it's hard, right? You're at the 9-yard line. You need one yard, but a field goal can tie it. Like there's a lot of different factors here that go into it, but going for it was a plus 7% win probability, right? Expected win probability. So it's a very obvious choice, and good on Manny Diaz for going that way.
And it was like literally like it was just inches. Like that was such a short distance that there was no reason to not go for it. And their guy just slipped up, or Star Thomas slipped while he was during the exchange. So they really should have gotten that as well. Like we got fortunate in that regard, but I mean, hey, that's on them for slipping up and not us.
The other two notes I had, I looked up how you can get a defensive delay of game.
Oh, thank you.
And the first way.
Oh, delightful.
This is coming from Reddit, so grain of salt. But the first way is if a defensive player picks up or moves the ball after it's been set by the ref. So
we know that
generally
didn't
you
happen.
shouldn't do that.
Wasn't
so
that?
Don't do that. The second one is during a 2-minute drill, if the defensive player purposefully prevents an offensive player from getting up or getting back to the line to run a play. So that is probably what happened.
Interesting. Okay, I'd have to rewatch what that's bit looked like, but if anyone at home wants to pull it up on ESPN and see for yourself, I guess that would make I guess that has to make it has to make the most sense because that was out of the timeout, and so guys were kind of just standing around. It felt like it didn't necessarily seem like we were like trying to like get in their way, but I could imagine someone was unaware standing near midfield coming off the sideline and was near their lineman. I don't know what, but yeah, it was a weird call nonetheless. I mean, it changed. I mean, that was the thing that changed the game, that turned the game on its face. Tech could have been driving down the field to make it 17-0, whatever, and instead we're talking about a field goal game with a double possession ahead of us.
And I'd like to circle back to a point that I made talking about Louisville. Again, you can afford a play or two of the blunders, or of the a tough penalty, things like that.
Right.
And I really think you can distill it down to just that, pair or single drive, I guess,
sure.
Where it's like, hey, like, yeah, Georgia Tech, 24, maybe a little bit light in the scoring department, but there was really just one really big play and one really big penalty versus not penalty call, and that's why they play play out the string and throw flags and things like that. That's the point of the game. The defense really, I would say, locked things down for the most part there in keeping them off the board and limiting those attempts.
It was so
Yeah,
good. It was so good. Yeah. I was
and
looking at the game. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna jump into some defensive analysis. I mean, like I think from the advanced stats notes on GameOnPaper.com, right? Duke was consistently in a third or six plus situation in late
Yeah. Yeah.
downs. That's a really good job of. I think something we've been talking about all year of Tech getting opposing offenses into disadvantageous situations, into passing situations and long third down attempts on throughout the year. I think that continuing is really good. I think they did really well on the Havoc side. This is 65th percentile Havoc performance. I think generated right around 8 Havoc plays on the day. So
Yeah.
that's really good. Still generating a lot of TFLs, and that's something that we haven't seen throughout the year actually. Tech is still consistent at running at preventing opponents from running the ball. It was an 8th percentile rushing performance from Duke. Obviously, that shifts here and there just depending on the importance of individual plays, right? That failed 4th and 1 from Duke that would have netted them an expected value of 7 win probability points was also ended up being -4 expected points, right?
This
Like
is yeah. Yeah. To your
some of
point,
that is variance, but you sort of get where I'm
yeah.
going with this. On the whole, they're still producing these really good upfront upfront performances. And then I think they also did really well in terms of making Duke be like I mean, Duke was very boomer bust, right? 47% stopped rate on their rushes
Yeah.
versus 32% rush opportunity. So when they were breaking things open, they were, 1/3 of the time they were getting free, generating 4 yards. But for like not the vast majority, but for a non-trivial percent of their rushes, they were all in front of the defensive line. So
Right.
I
And
think it's a good job by the defense that keep things contained that way. And I mean, you kind of see it in the final score, right? Only 14
yeah.
points allowed, and not that many plays for Duke on the board.
Third straight game where the defensive line has held our opponents to under 100 yards rushing. First time in the number, and I think it was since 2017. It said since we've last done that. This they are doing very very good. Who was it? Sorry. Amari Harvey was quick to laud the defensive line during the press conference that they're able to the defensive line is able to generate good pressure, or at least create something going on with only 3 or 4 guys rushing a lot of the time, which just gives for the secondary then a lot more opportunity to make plays, or at least to affect plays. I mean, had the one interception at the end of the game, but there was a couple plays where like balls just barely got through hands, or were just quick enough to where our guy just couldn't react fast enough to catch a ball or deflect the ball. But we were in
Hmm.
better spots way more frequently than we have been in the past these last few games. Granted, Malik Murphy is not a Tyler Shuck or a Cal McCord by any stretch of the imagination. So in theory, you would think we'd get closer to that. Um,
So flipping over to the offensive side of the ball now, I think this offense kind of struggled. I think 24 points, and some of the EPA numbers mask a little bit of other things that we saw in sort of other sets of numbers lower down the page. Longer drives, so a lot more tempo control in this game. It was around 10 plus plays, but
a
they
very quick game.
Tech struggled on early downs consistently. I think it doesn't matter as much just because they generated a lot of them, right? They consistently converted
Great
third
on
into
late downs.
first.
So good on late downs. That was like the one thing that like was promising was just how frequently third and fourth downs were always manageable. There's a couple
Mhm, yeah.
that
It's an
resulted in there was
average.
one
Go for it.
there was one that we got a very helpful roughing the passer call, but the guy just went head to head on Haynes King, even though he was standing straight upwards. I think there was one incompletion that was just no one out there, but there wasn't like a shot where Haynes could go deep, but frequently enough, it was something they could rush, something they had a we did a Philly tush, like Philly specific perfect tush push with Zach Pyron in the back at quarterback at one point on a fourth down. Like they broke out the we know how to get 3 yards if we absolutely must get 3 yards very quickly plays, which
Yeah.
was I think
And
the most impressive thing we saw all day.
And to your point, the average late downs distance for Tech was 4.2 yards. So
Manageable. Yeah.
like they're keeping things manageable on late downs, and that opens up your playbook, right? If you don't have to continue to convert 3rd and 7 and getting yourself into that situation, you're going to be able to say, hey, this is 2 down territory on every single drive or every single set of downs. And we can break this up piecemeal into 2 yards here, 2 yards there, or 3 yards
Yep.
here, 1 yard there. Or we can take that deep shot on 3rd and 4 and say, okay, well, like you said, we know how to get 3 or 4 yards. So
Yep.
I think that's very good, but I think on the flip side of it, early downs was a struggle in terms of EPA. I think the bright side is that I think a lot of that is because they ran the ball on a lot of those early downs. It was
Yep.
about 66% rush rate on the 61 total early downs. The notable thing there is if you look at the splits, they were only successful on 38% of those rushes, whereas on the passes, they were successful on 57%.
Yep.
So obviously, like passing is always more efficient. It's higher EPA on the whole. I get that, but also like I think it's clear here again, like early downs passing generally works out for you,
Yeah.
and
And a lot
produces
of
a
these
lot
were,
more plays.
yeah.
So
A lot of these were screen. I mean, Jake, you'll, I mean, I think you recognize, like, there were so
Screen,
many screen
dink and
passes.
dunk.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It was a very east, and so that was something that Key mentioned in the press conference was they really
yeah,
wanted to go east west today as well, like not just focus on being north south. And Jamal Haynes, 128 yards, like he was back to his normal full strength. He felt fully healthy finally after the week off, and that showed. Like that was clearly a big difference against Louisville. I
Oh
think
yeah.
we all saw against Louisville, like he was
Mhm.
clearly not all the way there. And
again,
this
and I
week,
think versus Louisville too, like they kept trying to send him straight through the middle in between the
right? And I
tackles.
think
And it's like
they
his strength is not that, right? His
no,
strength
no,
is going off tackle into that in that same like guard
exactly.
tackle gap that we talk
Well,
about
it,
and
even
bursting out
if
and making a cut.
Yeah,
even if it is a strength, if you are getting sent into a solid Power Five ACC line on every play, and you're not getting kind of that gapping, is I mean, it's not a great comp, but like
no,
versus a
you're
VMI or a Georgia State, but you know what I mean, where it's like you're gonna run into a wall, and there's only so many times you can do that and
right.
expect
And yeah, I
any
mean, like
any
to your
modicum of
point
success.
too,
So,
if he sees that coming and if he's hurt, like one of his legs is hurt, he's not going to be able to cut as effectively to the outside,
Right.
right?
yep.
And so prioritizing being able to get him going on the outside and through like onto the yard lines is I think is something like they've done fairly well. But to
Yep.
this point, I think with Jamal Haynes, I'm glad you mentioned his yardage totals. It's interesting. This is one of those times where using EPA reveals things that yardage doesn't.
Right.
Because if you look at his yards per play, it's 6.7. It's really good. Like
Love it.
that's
Love
a
it.
really good way to start your day. But if you look at EPA per play, he's zero. He's
Yeah.
only
Oh,
put together 0.08 total EPA on the day. And I took a look at the distributions of plays, right? Like looking at EPA and building a
Mhm.
histogram and yards gained on all of his plays and building a histogram. And it's not that all of his yards were negative, right? He only has one play that went for less than 0 yards. But it's that all of his carries are in that like they're all between like 0 or -2 and 0. Like a bunch of his carries are between -2 and 0 in terms
Right.
of EPA.
He
And
only
it's
had a
just
couple of those big chunk plays. Chad Alexander ended up having more of the chunk yard runs, or Singleton had, I think, had one as well. And or the screen game did that job. It ended up not being he filled in those other gaps.
right. And so what that tells me is that he had a lot of just like I don't know what the best way to describe this is. He just had like a lot of empty calorie kind of low
Sure.
value
Yeah.
rushes, right? And even if they're going outside and throwing those screens, they were just short yardage plays. And to that point, I think you bringing up Key's post game presser notes about wanting to go east to west more and using your skill talent to make plays instead of finding them in space, I think is relevant because that tells me that they game planned not to have King throw it deep to Singleton And I think that this is something that we've been talking about for a couple weeks, right? It's like they just don't
But
want to
okay,
uncork it.
no, I want to jump on that take. I want to jump on that take before we get down that rabbit hole because I
Go.
was thinking about that this afternoon because I knew it was going to come up. It was in our Slack. We've talked about this, and I don't necessarily think that that's true of King not being able to throw deep, namely because against Louisville, there were two or three deep balls that he
Oh, we
absolutely
did it.
unleashed.
Yeah, we
There's
did it.
there's
Yeah,
one to Singleton that was, if they would have wound up converting on that drive, then you're talking about a different game.
exactly.
I want to nip this take in the bud. I meant to say it yesterday in our Slack too, because people were kind of spiraling about that. They honestly, like, I would have liked to see them stretch the field a little bit, maybe a little bit more, but they didn't need to.
I'll note. Yeah,
Like
I'll also note
I think
Duke.
the playbook, I
Go
think
ahead,
the
go ahead.
playbook felt a little bit limited. And I think that ties into some of the run stuff we were talking about passing in the flats. But considering who you're playing next week, and who you're
Well,
playing the week after that,
yeah,
I think it's probably wise or at least fine
it's not
that
the end of the world. Yeah,
they won by 10 points against a Power 5 team and didn't have to, you know, empty
it
it all
wasn't
out like that.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
it wasn't
I don't know.
complicated. I will note Duke was playing two high safeties a lot in this game. They're playing
Yeah.
the free safety up there a ton. So, and the one like early down, or there was one early pass in the game where we tried to hit Malik Rutherford in the corner on a deep throw, and there was three
Yeah.
guys. Like King overshot all of them, but there was three defenders that could have gotten that ball if it was on target too. So, in the end, I think Duke was doing a lot of just trying to keep us as inside the sticks more than anything, and try to tackle us up there because they knew we had the speed to beat them probably if they let us do that. And so
And to that point,
in terms of game
the
planning,
lack
it's
of
good.
the
Yeah,
and in terms of the lack of the deep threat, I mean, you saw their safeties playing close in. Maybe that kind of hurts your run game a little bit, but clearly it didn't wind up mattering all that much.
no,
At least that's my Sunday afternoon sit on that for a little bit. And it's probably a little of this and a little bit of that, but I want to incorporate some diversity into the opinions there
right,
because
right,
I
yeah,
feel
No,
like
no,
everything kind of got slotted into the deep ball.
no,
Lack
that's
of.
fair. I think Jack bringing up the two high safeties is a really good point. Yes, that takes away your deep ball ability, right? You just don't want to do it, and that's probably why they wanted to go east-west,
yeah,
is to get their playmakers the ball and then have them run in that medium zone. But when you are working with against two high safeties, what becomes really efficient is design quarterback runs.
yeah,
And to that end, King's rushing performance in this game was not super great.
nope.
11 for 31, minus 0.17 EPA per play. I didn't watch it like all of this game, right? I had some other stuff going on, but I'll leave it to both of you to tell me, or I put it to both of you to tell me, are these just bad reads on these 11 plays or bad blocking? Like, where is the disconnect here for that rushing performance, especially when you're
Right.
in advantageous situations to do design QB runs? Like, where is the disconnect on why that wasn't effective for Tech?
Jake, it felt like Duke was doing a actually semi okay job of getting through our line on some of these runs. It wasn't like
Yes.
we were like strong arming them like we did against Florida State.
Hmm.
So there was that, which is also probably why our East West game was much more effective today or yesterday than our basic run game. He
Well, and that's why
didn't.
you saw a lot of quick screen flat
Yeah,
type passes too, with
yeah,
guy bearing down on you, boom, get it out type of deal.
yeah. It was. Yeah, there wasn't ever a moment where it just he had like a clear like massive hole like he had against Syracuse, and I guess
Hmm.
he had one against Louisville as well, where he could just run for miles. That opportunity was never really there. There was one zone read play, I think, where Alexander just kept holding onto the ball when King was trying to pull it, and they both just ended up holding the ball in for a 1 yard loss that may have actually turned into a pretty good one because Haynes saw something and Shad just never let go. But outside of that, yeah, it didn't feel like the opportunities were fully there for him. Our Slack was saying he didn't look like it. We were just wondering if he like wasn't fully healthy. I don't think that's the case, honestly. It might be, but like as again, like I think the opportunity is more dictated what they ended up doing versus his inability to throw downfield or make a run or something like that. He made
Yeah,
it
I mean,
smart.
if they want to go east-west, right? The way that King is run is typically like just outside the tackles or like within the
Yeah,
tackles. Like
yeah.
he's tried to find holes that put him between the hash marks. I realize that that first statement didn't make any sense, but you kind of get what I'm saying. It's like he
Right.
just goes slightly off tackle and has pulling guards coming along with him.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah,
Um,
he's not jump cutting like anybody else. He
no,
could beat some defenders to a corner. But in the end, and we saw it here, like if we need to have a quarterback run for a little bit, Zach Pyron's going in the game, and he's going to make that, and he gets that play done basically every time too. Like if we ever need that, he's the guy to do it. So I think there also is just a let's make sure we don't put Haynes in dangerous situations when we have to have this man available in the next few games, and we have the weapons fully healthy to do that instead. Um, which I think is important. And then once you get to those later games where if we like absolutely where if we're like maybe close to beating Miami, or if we're somehow or if we're in a I mean, I am sure there is something cooking for that Georgia game that's going to involve some wacky stuff where Haynes King does something crazy or whatnot. Like that's just what happens in rivalry games. So I mean, I would not be surprised if there is like just some element of we cannot lose this guy on a play call that isn't necessary in week 6 kind of situation. Um,
Yeah.
that's
but
fair.
also, I mean, it's also Duke. Like I mean, just to kind of go back to the high level, like they barely beat Northwestern on Lake Michigan. I mean, I say on Lake Michigan because it's like basically literally on the lake where that stadium is right now. They had to have a 21-point comeback to beat the our old coach last week. Like they are not super impressive. They knew they were a second half team though. He said this in the press conference. They were very clear about this, or Haynes said this in the press conference. Haynes King, that is, that Brent was emphasized to them during halftime. This is a second half team. This is going to come down to beating them and elevating the effort in the second half, and that's what happened. Like I think as that game went along, we were able to expose more cracks in Duke's defense as we just kind of just chugging along, kept chugging along. We ended up calling like we called 29 more offensive plays than Duke, so we were at a massive advantage in terms of just put putting their defense on edge and being able to move the ball better against them as well. So eventually, I think just literally just out hustling them and out manning them ended up being a difference in that fourth quarter when we broke away.
Yeah. And I want to point out one thing. I know that, this is probably not that unusual during a normal season, but just because we've made such a to-do about it for Louisville and whatnot in our direction, I would like to note that this is Duke's sixth straight game in a row, which is
Good
pretty
point.
rare for a team this year. So
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a odds and ends note, it's a little bit harder if you're a second half team to mount the second half comeback when it's, you know,
Yeah,
late
no, that's
and
fair.
you again been getting beat
Absolutely.
up for 6 weeks and that's I don't know, just a thought that crossed my mind.
So I think that's totally fair. We scheduled rested. I mean, we had the 2 week rest advantage here. Like this is the
Mhm.
flip side of what we had against Louisville, where it's like clearly we were shooting like they. Oh, I meant to say this earlier. Duke shot themselves in the foot just as often as we did as well. Like we won the
Yeah.
penalty EPA battle. We were not good on special teams though. We let some kick returns go into minus territory way too often tonight or last
Yeah.
night. That was a problem.
Yeah.
They know
That
that.
was
That was not great.
Where
where'd
you
that
can fair
come
catch
from?
those kicks, right? They know that, right? Like you can fair catch them before the 25-yard line and like just get it
Yeah.
at the 25. Like
Uh,
It felt like
it's
every one of our
fascinating to
drives
me.
started on the
but
eight.
well, no, I was saying well, we
You
allowed too
know.
many returns as well.
Oh,
Like it
true.
was it,
Yeah. Deep
it was more
returns. Yeah.
our kick defense I was more worried about than our offense on that side of the ball. But it did like the rest advantage was mattered here. I think without a doubt once it came down to the end of it with just how much hustle we were able to show out there. Whatnot. All right, now I'm repeating myself. So what's next?
Well, what's next is a date in Chapel Hill with North Carolina. That'll be a noon Eastern kickoff on everyone's favorite over-the-air broadcast for the CW, except I guess TCU's. It is I guess, the return of the former regime's head man well, not to Georgia Tech, but within contact of Georgia Tech. And UNC is not in a particularly good way. Let's put it that way, this
No,
season. So it's interesting. It is interesting. I don't think I want to put anything in pen or in the like audio pen if you get my drift.
I just cannot
Um,
wait to be at this game. I'm gonna go. There was no way I was letting myself miss this for a shot at redemption for my entire college experience as a football fan. Like
Yeah.
The cathartic potential is so high. Like I know if we, I've told myself if we lose, I get to add a new stadium to the list in a new city in America. The travel aspects are enough of a positive for me to I will walk away a winner no matter what happens on the football field. But
I'm sorry.
Jack,
please
having
God,
having
That is Coke.
just done the
please God, hey,
just done
hey,
the
let me
I
like
went to a
life.
new stadium and it's
No, no,
gonna
no.
be
I
okay
like
if we
life.
lose.
I like life
It,
enough to have that perspective. I'm sorry if you don't. That said, yeah, we need to beat the absolute mother living crap out of these guys. Like that's I mean, we if we don't put up more, if we don't put up 40, I'll be disappointed. That
Look,
that's
I
where
don't
I'm at.
care if they win or lose. They just need to put up points. That's kind of where I'm at on
Prove
this
the
one.
point. Yeah, prove the point. Prove the point more than anything. Yeah.
Let's talk about another thing that was announced at Bobby Dodd Stadium on Saturday night, the Full Steam Ahead fundraising initiative from the Alexander Tharp Fund. They want to raise $500 million from tech fans. They already have approximately 300 million committed. And this is a direct quote from the initiative website. Quote, full steam ahead will enhance infrastructure across multiple athletics facilities, deliver a best-in-class game day experience for Yellow Jacket fans, and provide the resources needed to navigate the ever-changing landscape of top-level college sports. End quote. So in the big composite of this project are three major initiatives. Number one is a renovation of Bobby Dodd Stadium, which will convert the entire stadium other than the north end zone to chairbacks and redo a couple of the premium spaces and also replace the video board, which I think is going on maybe 10 years old, maybe 12.
Yeah.
It's like replacing the Georgia Dome out here. Um, the second major initiative is a revamp of the Zelnak Basketball Center. So building in a new men's basketball locker room since the women's one was rebuilt in 2020, better strength and conditioning facilities, and then basically an entirely new level on the building from what the renders have
Yeah.
shown. It's very odd. It's insane to look at, honestly. So that's number two. And then the third one, and this is, I think, a project that we've been excited about for a while, is modernizing O'Keefe Gym, which is the home of Georgia Tech volleyball. They'll widen the concourse and upgrade fan amenities. And if you've ever been to O'Keefe and have noticed the state of that concourse that greets you as soon as you walk
The
in the
lobby.
door,
The lobby.
it's small. It's hard to call it a concourse, really. It is very small. So getting more space there, maybe even building a couple more seats. Who knows?
always
That would
thought
be
the put something on top of the concourse would be a volleyball club lounge space because you don't have enough space to put in like skyboxes, and I don't know if there's necessarily demand for that. But anything that they can throw us a bone with there is great as long as it doesn't take away the home court atmosphere. But the fans are such a huge part of that, and the low roof that I don't see either of those moving. Like
Yeah.
fans are still going to show if the product's as good as it's been, and the roof is not going anywhere. So
Yeah. It might be a thing where like you know how in the indoor tennis facility how there's like there's a room where donors and like
yep,
people can go and sit like do it.
there's one luxury box
There is the one
at Ken
room that's
Byers.
like both like for tech staff to sit in and yeah, I guess family and whatnot. So I imagine it'll be something kind of close to that because you could theoretically like put that on that wall where people come in on higher up if they're going to build
yeah.
something there. And there's already a staircase there when you come in, so they can easily just expand that staircase as well, I would think. I mean, it's all super exciting. I guess to mention to be specific at Bobby Dodd, the student section is what's going to not get chairbacks. It's still going to be bleachers. But
Tradition
everywhere,
is maintained,
but
baby.
everything else, and a scoreboard is getting added to the northwest corner of the stadium, where the ramp is on the Bobby Dodd on that north side. So
So
they'll
out of all of these, I think that is the one that I'm very questionable on. I get that there needs to be one there, but also why?
I mean,
As long
I
as
mean,
it
This
doesn't
is
blow out
random.
eardrums on the east side or the west side, I'm fine with it.
I
But
mean, who knows if that's a scoreboard? It's not necessarily speakers. Also,
Well, I
so
usually
mean, I
those two are
assume,
one. Those usually
yeah.
are built together.
I feel like our engineering school can figure out the audio engineering well enough to not make this a problem, but we'll see. This is also a thing many years down the road. There's not even like end dates for these, right? Like these are just it's
No.
happening.
Yes, I'll note that on the actual fundraising page, it mentions that none of these projects will be in motion until they are fully funded.
Got it.
Well, and
Okay.
also approved by USG. But I imagine
Good point.
that the trick here is they're not even going to go to USG until the projects are fully funded.
That
So if
yeah,
you're
makes sense.
worried about adding to athletics' debt, which we've talked about on the site before, I think this set of projects is not going to add a considerable amount to that.
Yeah. I
Uh,
think they're smart about this. The Fanning Center is fully privately funded. I mean, they know better than to just be like, let's add on this mounting debt for the projects from 25 years ago and make it even worse. Like they're that J Bad is not fiscally irresponsible at this time at Bama and at here has shown us so far. So
yeah. Before we get on to talking about a couple other things with this project, I wanted to mention this whole initiative is part of Transforming Tomorrow, which is the whole Institute's capital campaign. It is 25% of Transforming Tomorrow. It's a $2 billion
yeah,
campaign, and this is $500 million of it.
so it's a lot of it.
So it's a large chunk. And if anyone ever tells you that the Hill and athletics are not aligned, they are lying to you intentionally.
They are.
So
Yes.
keep
And,
that
and
in
and this
mind.
has been a known piece of Transforming Tomorrow. I mean, they've
They
kind
put
of
it in there.
given
That's true. Yeah.
some of the breakdowns of like, well, this is what we think. It's really putting a brand and projects and an ethos behind that 500 mil. And I mean, they've announced the actual capital pieces of this, but I have to imagine that there's, student athlete well-being and scholar, all the
Yeah.
soft stuff, if you will.
They've added
That
a
doesn't
line
necessarily make
specifically
for a
for that.
splashy piece. So.
The additional projects and initiative to further advance tech athletics through program-wide operational support kind of
Yeah.
bails you out on that one.
This is the most specific plan we've gotten of anything since they announced, like, yes, we're going to focus on athletics amongst everything else that's getting changed.
Well, I would argue it's probably one of the most well now fleshed out pieces of Transforming Tomorrow, other than we're gonna build Art Square. It's coming.
Yeah.
Just you
That
wait. Just
The
you
arts,
wait.
a
Like,
square.
Art
It's
Square
happening.
happening, new Guggenheim happening. Yeah.
yeah.
To mention so on the 300 million that's already confirmed. For those that weren't at Bobby Dodd Stadium, they did like the whole like big announcement in between the first and second quarter about this. Showed the pictures on the screen, but also a lot of the usual names that have been high dollar donors to the institute, whose names are on buildings and such. Um, Came out and they've I think it was meant to show like this is where a lot of the money has already come from to get this project off the ground. They did
Are you
not give a
telling me that
specific.
they rounded up the usual suspects?
Sounds like they did. Sounds
It's
like
the
they did.
Magnificent Seven,
They
except instead of some sort of Quentin Tarantino thriller,
it's
I was
checks.
going for Casablanca, but that just shows the difference in yours and my pop culture exposure. So
Well,
also Magnificent Seven is not a Quentin Tarantino movie. I
no,
was
it's
thinking of
not.
Hateful Eight. So
Yeah,
I
very
was
good.
0 for 2
Very
on that one.
just well off. But
hooray, we're doing great.
anyways,
This is great podcasting.
All right,
anyways,
back to the big overarching question, I think, with this. And this came up in our writer's room when this was like details were trickling out about this ahead of a Saturday's game. Does it make sense for the Athletic Association to allocate $500 million on what are ostensibly entirely capital investments versus scholarships versus some sort of player compensation plan? And I think just to open the conversation here, I'll go to both of you in a minute. I think it's a very tough call, right? I think you're trying to decide between how can we generate future revenue with regards to adding the premium spaces or improving the premium spaces and improving the game day experience. You're also tackling some level of recruiting interest with the renovations to Zelnak, but you're not really taking care of this post-house lawsuit settlement world in which you now have to dedicate it's probably like 25 million dollars. I don't know what the
yeah,
number is per
that's been the
school,
estimated number.
but $25 million, let's say, per year to player salaries, player compensation, whatever you want to describe it. So let's open up the floor here. Jake, let's go to you first. What is your take on this?
on the fact that it exists. I mean, how do I put it? I think there are certain folks in the From the Rumble Seat extended universe who would agree with me very strongly, which I'm all for a chair back. I've got stinger seats on my seats. Like I see the value in that. I get it. I think just the stadium looking gold would be great. But I think these are for a lot of for a lot of these pieces, giving somebody a nicer looking skybox or a gold seat instead of a bleacher bench doesn't do anything to meaningfully change the key piece that needs to get attacked or addressed, and that is the large debt and the lack of endowed scholarships, coaching positions, things like that. And to their credit, you know, great tapping Richard Bergmark to, endow the swimming position. The Byers is for both men's and women's tennis is fully endowed.
Yeah.
Those are awesome steps. And, maybe there's probably not a world where you can get an endowment big enough to have like Brent Keys is just, in a giant pile of money that makes more money kind of thing.
Right.
That's a lot. But, there's a world in which, some volleyball positions, some softball positions, baseball positions, more of these scholarship pieces are kind of in that set it and forget it. And if you were like, hey, we're just gonna, and this is, it doesn't make for good renders. I'm all over the urban infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. You get news all the time with flashy renders. How many of them actually wind up happening? Your mileage may vary. It's probably a little bit different with how institutional Georgia Tech is versus some apartment building somewhere type of thing or some road somewhere. But all that to say, if you just said, "Hey, we're putting the $300 million that we already have raised," which again, wild, but that's how they launch these types of things. If you said we're putting that under lock and key, the Georgia Tech Foundation is just going to manage it like an endowment, and that's throwing off, 5-ish% a year. I mean, that's your cash flow, right? Your cash flow difference right there. But then at the same time, Texas just raised $1 billion for athletics. So like, you know,
There is an arms
guess
race
we're
component
screwed.
of it,
Like,
right?
Yeah.
Like
I don't
there
know.
is an arms race component of it. Like I think you saw this a couple years ago too with Tennessee raising like $300 million at a snap of a finger for their
Mhm.
facilities renovation. And even that is like getting into like 5 years ago at this point.
Yeah. And Neyland
So
Stadium needed it badly as well. Like that stadium had some problems. So that
and
was
Tech doesn't have the benefit of owning part of the city in ways that like a Tennessee does.
right.
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 So when Tennessee says that they want to do the whole Braves battery thing in Knoxville, there's more like they can actually do it and they can have
Mhm.
multiple revenue streams that way, whereas Tech is kind of
And
has the hand it's dealt in that
and
way.
when you are the town, like part of that is the Smokies coming back in from being the Smokies are the Cubs Double A affiliate, Tennessee Smokies, coming back into downtown and being a part of that broader pitch because that university and that minor league baseball team are a big piece of that, discretionary dollar that gets spent in the city. And we talk about this in Atlanta all the time. Like, there are people who will never even consider going to Georgia Tech games, not because they hate Tech or don't love sports or anything like that, but that it's just not their thing.
Right.
It's
They're
instead of
gonna
it
they're
being
gonna
one or
go
two,
do something
it's
else,
like seven, right? It's like
Yeah.
one, it's like
Mhm.
seven on their priority
Yeah.
list. And
You think we can get
uh,
Rob Buckhead to fund some things?
Yeah. The
right next to
newest
John
rich guy,
Decatur.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we'll get
I
Pookie and Jet to
I hear
come
Tyler
to a Tech
John's
game.
Creekman is rolling in some dough right now.
Tyler Johns Creek man sends his regards and says no. But
More or
no,
less.
the uh the thing that comes around too is I don't know that I mentioned this on the pod and not to go. I was just in Louisville for like the fourth time because again, great content.
As
But
he
they have this huge
mentions,
banner on their stadium that says America's College City. Huge banner. It's like the whole east side of the stadium. And it's true, but there's just no chance that, Georgia Tech up against Braves, Falcons, Hawks, even if they were to win 8 national titles in a row, like it's still
Yeah.
going to be I'm a Virginia Tech grad. I went there. I was a Michigan State grad. I went there. Like Atlanta's a melting pot in a lot of different ways. It
Yeah,
just is.
it's yeah, it's the same battle we've been battling for however many decades. It's just like we're just in a very unique, weird situation where we're trying to do something as we're trying to play like one of the tops out there in college football landscape, but we are dealt a ridiculously different hand compared to so many of those other schools in terms of geography, history, who our clientele is, what like every little thing about tech gives us some sort of disadvantage almost in this
But to
regard.
that point,
outside of being old.
the fact that $300 million of this is already committed, and yes, it's the usual suspects, is that on top of that, like people have been consistently donating to both competitive drive initiative fundraisers. Like people, if the team is good, which it has been at least decent the last 2.5 years.
It's amazing what decent does. Yes.
It's amazing what competency establishes, right? People will give money. They will just hand you buckets of money, Scrooge McDuck style.
Yeah. And there were over 8,000 students there. Not that students are giving buckets of $300 million.
They will.
At least I wasn't when I was a student.
But,
but like
they have
you're
the
building
potential.
fans and you're building that interest, and you see it translate to. And Akshay, you and I have only been to one volleyball game, or maybe one volleyball game together this year. But Jack, I mean, you've been to plenty. Like the students are turning out for that. There's lines out the door. I'm interested to see how it translates to basketball and baseball. You know, like
I think. I mean, okay.
There's more banners on fraternity houses. Like these are little things, you know.
I think I have 2 points here to give some perspective here. Like post-COVID, so like that post-COVID run of students that came, a lot of them, I think, were finally seeking in-person experiences. For like everyone was seeking in-person experiences for one. A lot of them were new and didn't experience the end of the Jeff part of it because 2020 COVID, a lot of students didn't go to those games, and then he was gone. And then 2021 was awful, of course, and then 2022 he's gone 3 games in. So you got a lot of just new faces on campus that are ready for this newness, this new thing. Like, I mean, Georgia Tech football, I mean, I wasn't a student then, but I'm sure it felt like a brand new thing once Brent Key got hired. There was something to be much more excited about. And I mean, also, like, we all were there during the worst stretch in athletics history on campus. Like, everything is better when you start winning.
I wasn't.
You were
I
not.
get out of
not.
this.
This is very much a me thing. In part, I guess, Jake, you missed some of it too. But like, I got a bowl game and an Elite Eight appearance. That's it. And so in volleyball, like one basketball game. But
my red cap has a UGA win on it, and that is a very rare thing.
You could sell that for probably some good money. But all that to say, like, it's a mixture of like finally there's reason for those students to pay attention. They want to do that fun college stuff, like to have the full college experience. The football is a massive, massive piece of that, and it finally is a desirable option for them. But then also to get to I think a point, Jake, you might be getting to, our alumni base is exploding right now because we have we're admitting more students in undergrad. We're admitting more students in transfer. We have a lot of online students, which, granted, there's a lot of them are online. They're not from Georgia, but it gives a connecting point for those people that say, I'm a Georgia Tech grad. The athletics part is the easiest way to stay in contact with the school and stay in touch with it and feel some sort of relationship to it. So
as much as people will try and be like, well, we need to do this. No, people are going to pay attention to football. And you saw it in, I'm sure you guys had just like a handful of random friends that you're like, you didn't really care about football. Why'd you go to the game in Dublin? It's like, you know, because that's how they stay in touch, and it's a great excuse to do it.
And I think it's just to close the loop here to show, like, yes, this is an arms race right now. College football has absolutely no guardrails whatsoever, and it is the wildest Wild West right now. But at the same time, right? Tech has to show and impress upon these new faces and people that they want to donate and come to games for decades on end, that they care about this stuff and they're going to give them experience worth coming back to that's new and better than when they were students. That's what making the stadium better and all these experiences better is going to do.
And that's like hell of a block party in those aspects. ACC Huddle even being there, which I saw this in the game notes. We're 6-0 when ACC Huddle comes to campus, which is cool.
When Mark Richt is on campus, we do great things.
The universe is really balancing the scales there. But I want to make a point. You guys are both in-state, so I don't think you're related quite as hard to the recent Wall Street Journal article about kids from the North seeking out, like, quote unquote, college experiences, quote unquote. Like, you would be astonished to know how many people from like New Jersey and DC are like, yeah, I'm at South Carolina because I want to go to a football school or things like that. Like those are
Northern
to your
Virginia,
point, like
Northern Virginia, New Jersey, all of them go down
Georgia Tech,
Georgia. Like
Yeah, yeah,
there's a
Mhm.
bunch from Nova at Tech, but like
I,
Alabama
and
and
granted,
Georgia and South
in my
Carolina.
corner of the Midwest, like you have Big Ten schools for that on some level, on a lot of levels. So I was a
yeah.
little more like, oh, you're going to Georgia Tech, that's fine. They had the program I wanted to do, that kind of thing, and I like the vibe. But like, it's still a much more growing thing for people to be like, tuition's better. Oh, chase the weather. I might
Mhm.
as well. I want that kind of experience, and I think that translates to exactly the trend that we're seeing right there. I mean, shoot,
Yeah.
the lead image on that article was direct leading the team out of the tunnel in the Wall
Which
Street Journal,
made
no
like
less.
gave me some
Like,
good brain chemicals, by the
yeah,
way.
oh,
That's that.
absolutely.
Yeah, that article that's massive. That's a massive thing. That's gonna change some mind, or at least
And
there's been
everyone that you know in tech leadership was very
Yeah.
proud to be the thumbnail on that one.
between
Oh
But
that
yeah.
thumbnail and being called a new Ivy League. It's been a
Yeah.
great year for tech administration branding. All that to say, I think
So
my final point here is to not do this investment would have been a massive shot in the foot in the deal with the debt, do this kind of thing. To not do this, or at least maybe, I mean, could you have waited a year? Maybe, I don't know, but
you
saying
strike
you're
while
gonna
the iron is hot, right?
do it now. You got to do it now. That's what J Bat is here for, was to solve these kind of problems. Like
Yeah.
literally, this is why we have him. To not do this would be Bat. I mean, unless he had a different idea, not doing his job, but then Cabrera just hiring the wrong guy. Also, like that, we have to stay inventive. We have to stay out. We have to press the gas compared to where we've been. So
well,
this is what
To
this is
it's
that
doing.
it's bold. It's bold, and I
Yeah,
just to tie that loop back because we've thrown out a number figure, 25 million a year, right? To that end, if you just put that 500 mil in an endowment and have it toss off 5% every year, that's your 25 million. But what's all the soft stuff that comes with that? And I think that's where, I mean, this is maybe me wish casting, but I would love to just pick somebody's brain from the athletic association
yeah,
to
I
say,
know.
hey, between the three of us, we've got a very informed audience base of people who like come to this podcast. Like I assume that this is something that draws them here because we do talk about this stuff because we're all very interested. And I think that would be just, maybe in a month or two when things quiet down or there's more public stuff, but that would be, you know,
Yeah.
they're clearly grappling with this too, right?
Oh yes, it is their job to also. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say on this before we take a short break is that it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very comforting to watch someone that is very good at their job, like do exactly their job,
mhm.
right? Like Jay Bat, when he was originally hired, we said the tech had one serious problem, which was like revenue generation and cash flow. And everything that he has done, more or less, has been to improve revenue generation and cash
Yep,
flow, for better or
yep,
for worse.
yep, yep.
And this is just another feather in that cap. And I have to, you have to respect it. Like
Yep. He's done the
he
job.
is known for one thing, and he does that one thing very well.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And so hats off to him. Speaking of revenue generation and cash flow, let's take a short break and we'll be right back to talk about volleyball in a sec.
As
Back in the
always,
tip.
yes. This podcast is brought to you by Section 103. Section 103 is the finest purveyor of Georgia Tech apparel goods. Really, apparel goods is a great way to put it. They are great. I wear mine to essentially every Georgia Tech sporting event that I go to because they look good, they feel good. Great gold, navy, retro, current logos. They've got it all, and it is the place to do it. We've talked about cash flow, of course. Licensed merch is great, but also NIL merch is great too. Check out Haynes King and, of course, other options there. I saw a Haynes King tech-like shirt in the wild yesterday. I was like, oh, I know that shirt. So I felt like I wanted to mention it here today. They look great. And as always, free shipping on orders over $80 every day, but use code FDRs for 10% off. Tell them we sent you. Section 103 and the gang do a great job, and we cannot, and I stress this, cannot recommend them highly enough. We all are avid purchasers of their wares. Find them at section103.com and at section 103 on Twitter. Gents, what do we got next?
Let's talk about volleyball next. And boy, it's been a
Oof.
an adventure for Georgia Tech volleyball the last couple of weeks, hasn't it been? The number 19 volleyball team, women's volleyball team in the country, per the coaches poll, faced off against Notre Dame and Louisville this weekend. And I think this Notre Dame game was kind of in the works on Friday. I said in our writers' room early on, no Georgia Tech athletic team has ever played a normal game versus Notre Dame, like in
Yeah.
existence. Like every single one of these is super weird. Like regardless if it's men's basketball, women's basketball, I think is more that you can kind of write that one on write that one in pen. But like volleyball, especially like last couple of years, and I think Jack debunked me on this one. But just the vibes of all of these Notre Dame fixtures are super off, like
Oh,
consistently.
even the softball ones are weird. We don't have
Soft,
to get into
Yeah.
that right
the
now.
No,
We
no,
softball.
played
those
some
were
weird
also
ones
weird.
there
So
too. Yeah.
this is a softball and men's basketball led weirdness that trickles
Yes.
into the other sports more
It
than
just is
anything. Yeah.
infected. It's just infected volleyball now
I
over the
would
last, like, I think 3 of the last 4 years.
Will
uh definitely
will
not
will
just this one actually in the last.
will men's
No, 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 no.
basketball win by 1 point or lose by five?
This was the first time we lost a set to them in 3 years, so that's where we're at.
Okay.
But
2 of the last 4
yeah,
years. Let's
yeah,
go. Let's go with that. But to get to the actual point and the
yeah,
score, a
yeah.
3-2 victory over Notre Dame in South Bend at Purcell Pavilion. My note from this game is that you did not want to lose this, especially
No,
No,
after
no.
getting pancaked versus Pitt and losing like a tough one to
yeah,
SMU to open the ACC slate. You did not want to start 0-3
no.
and
Well, more
potentially 0-4 with who's coming around the corner, and we'll get to that in a second.
yeah. The
But
two losses were in permanent marker this for this stretch of 4 games more than anything. Or they were chiseled into rock. But this one was the if you don't win this game, that something's really wrong. To keep in mind, Eloise Suarez has been out since the Florida game with a broken finger, and she'll be back in November. So we're trying to run our 6-2 formation with Ashlyn Goolsby at center, which we had to do because we need to have height in the front row, and that's what the 6-2 allows us to do with either Laura Fisher, Leah Harper, and we added some Anna Bosey in today also against Louisville. This Notre Dame game, we had lost 6 straight sets. We hadn't done that ever in the Michelle Collier era at home. It was the first time since 2013 we had lost 6 straight sets at home, and then this was now a seven. We lost the first set, so it had been the seventh straight lost set for us. We alternated the first 2 sets, Notre Dame, then Tech, then Notre Dame, then Tech in the fourth, and we generally, uh, man, it was just weird. It'd be sets where we just looked off, and then we were back on, we just looked off. It was just like an on off switch for us, which Collier has mentioned to me, like it's just like it happens sometimes where they just don't press the gas hard enough in a match and just put stuff away. Um, it wasn't like we were like out of system or stuff like that. Like, it was just poor play for too often. Thankfully, the fifth set went our way. We were down 12-9 also in that fifth set. Like I thought we were toast. But we got it to 13-13 and put the hammer down at 15-13, which was nice on a net violation of all things. But
the
like,
worst way to lose, by the way. Like
it's not great, but I mean, Emiliano had 42 assists, which was nice. Mendez had 20 points. Like Larissa Mendez right now is a saving grace of this team. It now is if Bertolino or Otene are not on, Mendez is usually doing quite all right. Uh, her she is of the like right now she's like the third best right side in terms of expected point value in all of D1 right now, or at least in the Power Four schools, which is really something. Um, like
that's
right
coming
now,
from Chad Gordon, by the way.
Chad
Sorry,
Gordon's
just want
yeah,
to get the source in there.
yes. He right now, yeah, Larissa is the thing we've got right now. Otene's been good on serving, but they could do that. Teams know to target Sophia Velez also in the back row, and we saw a lot of that going on. In general, like it's still like our blocking is not good enough. We're the worst blocking team in the ACC right now, and it keeps getting exposed, which allows teams like Notre Dame to get some blocks or to block us, but then also take care of us if we ever play sloppy. Like we are a good team that can't afford to play bad, basically, right now with how good the ACC is, and that's what happened in this match.
I mean, I think on top of that too, and we'll get to Louisville game in a second. It's very clear that Tech is in that second tier of teams,
They are
right, in
now,
the
yeah, yeah,
ACC. And yes, it's a small second tier, and yes, being in that second tier is still like your top 20 team in the nation at worst. but the division between your Louisvilles and your Pitts and I mean maybe even your SMUs, right? Maybe we need more data points on that is pretty significant. And there's a pretty sizable jump,
Yeah.
or pretty sizable gap in between those two tiers.
Yeah.
To talk about the Louisville game very quickly, since we've mentioned it like four times already, a 3-0 sweep at Louisville in the L&N House of Pain, named after a train line or a train company that no longer exists, which is great. Credit union name for a train line that no longer exists, which is great. Um, yeah, I mean, it sounds like this one went more or less like the pit game, except with a little bit more
It
teasing.
was better. This was better than the pit game, at least, because we actually had some moments where we were stringing together like real life, and we were leading in the third set. Like should have won the third set. This was
Oh my gosh.
a
Yeah.
relapse into some 2022 tech volleyball kind of stuff here, where we were up 21-15, up six, our biggest lead by far the entire at any point in the match. And
Well, they look pretty good doing that to get out to 6 points first,
they did that first two sets. I mean, our first set we actually like we didn't look slow. Like we looked slow in the first set against Notre Dame. We were not playing fast enough whatsoever in that match, which I think is more than anything why that match fell flat. But we were playing decently fast. Louisville was hitting efficiently. They were doing what top five teams in the nation do. They can defend really well. They can block. They can do everything really well. That's just what happens when you play Stanford, Louisville, Pitt, Wisconsin, any of these, or Nebraska. That's just what happens. And they were doing that, which Tech as a whole, when we face a team doing that in that top five stretch, we just do not have enough firepower to overcome that for the most part. We don't have enough height in blocking to take care of that. Um, we have and also Emiliano not being a tall setter doesn't help in this regard as well, which means we have to work
Yep.
around her not being tall. We could get away with this with D'Amico and play a 5-1 in the last couple of years because she had enough height to be a blocking presence. Emiliano's only 5'7". That doesn't work when you're facing a 6'2" middle blocker, basically, or anything like that. Like you can't pull that off. And when she can put a ball over in two at times, she's got to be really careful and really quick and find the tiniest of holes to get it done. So we have limitations right now that basically when I was telling Jake, and Jake, I know you like this point a lot, it forces us to get points when the best teams are not playing well and
Yep.
take advantage. And we kind of we did it today. Like when Louisville wasn't good, we were winning the third set and we were doing really well. But then the moment that Anna DeBeer decided, okay, I'm gonna stop hitting errors, uh it just flipped on its head and we had nothing to show for it. So
Yeah.
I think that's the theme. I don't not many details we need to get to with this Louisville game. They held us pretty with our attacks. We're not good. We were not hitting efficiently. We hit under 200 in both of these matches this weekend. That's where we're at right now. Is against a top five team and against a team that's probably going to be middle of the ACC. We're not hitting even 200 against them right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah. What you got, Jakes? I know you watched some of this.
Yeah, I watched most of the game today, Friday. I was predisposed, but I think the fact that it played out about as expected, more or less, is for the Louisville game. Notre Dame, I would not have expected a 5-set game,
Right.
but
Right.
the fact that it played out more or less as you expect, um, probably. I'm not gonna say it's like brings peace, but it's like how much can we dissect from this? Louisville was the better team. They looked like the better team throughout the vast majority of the match, and the 1 point Tech kind of started putting things together. They couldn't really buy a break. I think that there is, like Akshay said about the tiering of the ACC, that's a great way to put it. We're spoiled. We've been, two to Louisville and Pitt's 1A and 1B for the last better part of a half decade at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Always that second, never the conference title to show for it. And arguably maybe there's a world in one of those two teams grabbing it there. But we've discussed this team, right? Jack's talked about playing a 6-2 and being short on personnel for that. We've also discussed being short in the middle from an actual middle blocking perspective, and
Yeah.
that's certainly part of it too. But at the end of the day, there's a giant Julia Bergman and Mariam Brambilla set of banners in the gym, and those are well deserved. And we were pretty spoiled to have not
Yeah.
just 5 or 6 years of them both being there, but even periods where they overlapped. I mean that that
Right. It's
that
different
year
when
of
you have
2021 was something different. Like
it's different.
that
Yeah.
was a better team. Like
Yeah.
because they were effective at all of those. They had the middle blocking to match and pretty experienced from the setting and the defensive specialist. And this is a team that is honestly, as I think about it more, the fact that they have some of the wins that they have to boot, I think is impressive given some of the personnel injury wise or else.
Right.
Issues or not even issues. Just that's what happens when you go through the normal cycles of a team. It's not talking about the team the same way that we've talked about certain other ones. This is a
Yeah.
team where, kind of like Georgia Tech golf, they're always reloading. Women's tennis has been there more years than not here. It's not they're squandering talent. It's just, hey, this is the hand they're kind of dealt. And,
Right.
maybe they
I think
say,
that's
hey,
right.
we're gonna go change our priorities in the portal or in high school recruiting and go from there. But
Right.
we're halfway into playing the hand that we're dealt, right? So
Yeah, it's very different when you have three All-Americans instead of one at the same time.
yeah.
Like that is
Mhm.
a makes a
Yeah.
massive difference in a sport where there's only six people on the court for your team at a given time. So, yeah, this is what we have right now. But uh, yeah,
It was an
it's
exacerbation of all the points we saw from SMU too. I guess you guys weren't at the game, but like
yeah,
your looks from even your great outside hitters or your rights that you have, it's like if those are all your looks, they know that they could cheat and block multiple there, and
right.
maybe your soft off speed stuff doesn't work as much without the middle threat, and that all those
We
things add up into it,
Yeah,
I think.
at this point, there was a point in this game where they had Bosey in at middle blocker over DeAndre Pierce just to get more
Mhm.
height up there. Like they
Yeah,
just has to have
absolutely.
like sometimes just the raw genetics eventually just are a determining factor at times in literal strategy and gameplay. Which I mean, it sucks that it comes to that, but I mean, when skills like that, just the tiniest of things make a difference when you have to play. You have to find any little gap you can to beat a team like Louisville. And that's where we're at. That's just what happens. So I mean, I'm glad we pushed them to extra points still in that third set. Like they had to win 27-25. I made a note in my recap that I think we've in the six sets between Louisville and Pitt where we lost 152 to like 97 or something like that over those three
Mhm.
sets. Like it's if you're gonna put show where the divide is, it's that. Like we are never like, and we have three more games against projected top five teams right now this season. They all come at
Yep.
the end of the year. Um, I mean, I hope we're better then, and we have right. But this is also where we're at. If we don't win, uh, if so, our next schedule stretch is the part of the ACC that's not the hardest, to put it one way. It's both Virginia schools, it's the Research Triangle schools. If we don't win all of these, or if we lose one of them, that's about as much as we can do to even have to, I think, light a candle for like a reliable tournament spot, because SMU is going to take one, um,
Hmm.
and Stanford's going to take one. I don't know how they're going to think, the committee's going to think about this with the reshaped conferences and things like that. Like, are they going to just let nine
Eh,
ACC teams in the conference? I don't know. Or the tournament? I don't know.
yeah. Oh
I
Uh,
mean,
yeah. I
yeah,
think they would.
probably.
they
I'm not concerned about that. I thought you were going to say
right,
to have a reliable shot at hosting. I think we're
but well, I
definitely on
mean,
the outside looking in right there for
oh, yeah,
that piece
absolutely,
now. And if you
yeah.
drop any of those games, you're probably not looking
And
at
we
doing
also got
that. So
Clemson back to back as well. So like these are all winnable games. Like these are all winnable games. We have beat all these teams the last time we played them. Virginia did take us to five in a weird stretch. North Carolina is the only team I'm like slightly worried about because Mabry Shaftmaster's legit, very good outside hitter for them, and that's on the road. So I don't know how that's going to go. But nonetheless, we have five home games coming up here that just I cannot waste home court at all. At Duke, at UNC is the only like stuff where it can get funky. But like if we are not, what's my note? I said if we're worse than 8-4 in the ACC by the end of this stretch, then we're cooked. Is my current estimation because of what comes after.
I think that's completely legitimate. For more context, Tech is 16th in the Evolve rankings right now. North Carolina is 21st. Florida State is 22nd. And I'm trying to see if there are any other team. Notre Dame is 32.
Yeah.
Miami at 34. So it's a tight bunching of some of those second tier programs. Second tier, not derogatory, but like
Mm-hmm.
not your Pitt, your Louisville, and your Stanford and your SMU.
Yeah.
Right. So keep that in mind, especially when it comes to those North Carolina and Florida State games as those come up. And not to overlook Virginia either, because Virginia gave Tech a run
Uh,
last year, and
That was such a wild match last year. That
I
was the
watched
weirdest
all
thing.
5 sets of that, and it's been a while since I've been like extremely annoyed with this team, and that was just 5 sets of just like constant frustration. So um keep an eye on these results. I think Jack, you're right. Like they have to be 8-4 or better outside the
yeah,
stretch to keep pace with their expectations for the season, right? Or their
yeah.
desires for this season. So I think that's kind of where we'll leave that. Gentlemen, shall we hit the hurry up and walk through the rest of the news on the flats?
Yeah, sure.
Jake, tell me about men's and women's basketball.
Oh, geez, I didn't add this, but the preseason media availability did get posted this week. I did see Nell and Damon interviews up. Haven't chomped too much into that, but they are advertising season tickets at football games. So, it's that time of year. We're about to come into one of our overlap seasons. So, if you like this content, get ready for these episodes to be longer. But should be a lot to like between both of those teams this year.
First game for both of those squads is in a month, by the way.
Hmm.
Hooray.
It's already October. Where does the time go? Speaking of other programs, let's talk about swim and dive very quick. The men received one vote in the coaches poll, and no votes for the women. But I don't think they've had
I
a meet in a couple weeks. So
I have a stat. They have swum only against Emory, who are D3. There are 15 ballots in the coaches poll, to my estimate, just based on the total number of points in it, and the number of points that you can earn, 1 to 25 type of deal. So yeah, that's 1 out of 15 coaches agree that Georgia Tech swimming is a top 25 team. I don't know if that's a scientific way to put that, but certainly something to note. Yeah, I'll save my upcoming piece about who they're swimming against next for trivia, because there's exactly one school for which I can get reliable historical swimming matchup data for, and we'll get into that in just a sec. In
let's
terms of other stuff, Kennesaw State, Georgia Tech squared off in 2 club hockey games this week. Club hockey got 1-1, so they're in the good side of the ledger, at the very least for the first time. So that's great to see. Men's and women's cross country hosted a meet. Love that they're doing their invite this year. That was down in Fairburn at Boker Farm. Georgia Tech men finished third. The women finished second. Of note, Run and Rec, the club team, actually sent their men to this invite as well. I didn't notice any other club teams on the list, but I did notice Run and Rec, who actually had 2 athletes beat scoring varsity athletes. I thought that was interesting. It would have only moved them up to second, and the men still would have finished behind Emory-Riddle, an aeronautics school down in Florida. So it wouldn't have gotten them over the top, but I did think that was interesting that the Run and Rec was very competitive and better than Troy's, D1 team, but not as good as Emory. So, go figure, perfectly balanced. But note on the men's side, FSU only sent 3 guys. They all finished top 7, including the first overall. So if they would have sent 2 more guys, odds are they probably would have won. Just news and notes. FSU is the team that the women finished behind. There were more D1 type teams on the women's side. Tech finished in front of UAB, South Al, Georgia Southern, Troy, and also Emory in local interest there. In terms of individual finishes, Tech had a handful of good finishes on the men's side. Alex Thomas finished in 9th in the 8K. Hayden Marshall 13th, Ethan Kernow 17th. The women, Reagan Mahoney 5th, Katie Hamfield 7th, Gracie Crum 13th, and Catherine Byrne 16th. So pretty decent showings there. Oh, and the women ran a 6K. I'm going to continue the hurrying up softball. They did play North Georgia in a 10-inning game fall exhibition on Friday night. No notes there as ever for fall softball. And number 17 golf. They tied for 8th place at the Ben Hogan Collegiate Invite. They were behind Oklahoma, Texas, Auburn, UNC, Arizona State, Vandy, Stanford, and Alabama is the team they tied with. So those are all very, very strong programs. I wouldn't say that 8th is terribly concerning there, but they are sitting at 17th in the most recent coaches poll. They were in 5th after day one, and kind of a bifurcation score wise. Cale Fontenot and Benjamin Reiter tied for 11th and 14th at +1 and +2 respectively, with Kim Ty and Hansen all in the double digit over par. So a little bit of a delta there, and probably the driver of the results. Gents, my trivia is fast,
Oh,
but I did notice it when I was pulling together some stats, if you are so inclined.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so there's one school that somehow manages to have a newspaper clipping or box score for like every sporting event they've ever done. It helps that they're a women's school until like 1947. But that does mean we have reliable meet by meet with score data for every FSU Georgia Tech swim meet that has ever occurred. Pretty neat. I
yeah.
maintain that this is the most consistent dual meet that we do, which is certainly pretty easy to claim because we only do like four of those a year, and FSU's almost always one of them. Gents, my question for you is in 44 matchups dating back to 1950, do you have a guess for what Tech's all-time record is in dual and try and quad meets against FSU?
Huh.
Across both genders.
Nope. These 44 are just the men. I can get to the women in a second.
Um,
Oh no. A gap in my
I
knowledge.
will go
How good has
for
Forrest Lake been at swimming since the 50s? I have
I'll
no
go
idea.
for a 30 or 300 win percentage.
300. I was gonna go a lot higher than that. Uh, I don't. Oof, Jesus. I don't know. This is absolutely random. I'm going 65%.
Jack, you are much, much too optimistic.
Well, I
I'm
have no
very
idea.
sorry.
I truly had
Uh,
no idea.
Georgia Tech all time against FSU in dual try and quad meets on the men's side is 41 and 3. And by that I mean 3 and 41 because FSU has won 41 of those times.
Oh. Ah!
Woof.
Oh God.
The
All right,
wins the
I
win
set my expectations too high for that one.
the wins are
Oh my goodness.
a 46 to 40 win in 1957. That's away, so assuming that means at Georgia Tech. A 183 to 116 win again at Tech in a tri meet in October of 2014, and a 158 to 141 win in October of 2018, which I explicitly remember because I was like, oh, that might mean that they're good, and they finished top 24 in the nation that year. So
Eh,
it did wind up being good. I will note last year this meet was pretty close, and it has been close in 23 and 21 and really 2020 as well. It has not been a thrashing by any means. A lot of 3 and 2 and 5 point losses. Interestingly enough, the women they've swam 20 times now. Tech's been in the mix since 2001 as a varsity team. So really, it means that they've only ever not seen each other twice. In that span, in those 20 matches or in those 20 meets, 17 and 3. So same number of wins for the ladies, but took them about half the
wow.
time. So good job, ladies. They did
Amazing.
win last year. The Tech women 160 to 140. So keep an eye on that. That'll be coming up this next weekend as the swim and dive teams get their first D1 competition in the mix.
All right.
Good stuff. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Jake, where can the people find us?
Yes, as always, the people can find us at FromTheRumbleSeat.com. We put out this podcast, but also tons and tons of other content about Georgia Tech football, basketball, and really anything under the sun. You can email us comments, questions, suggestions, something you want us to cover, news you think we should know. FromTheRumbleSeat@gmail.com is the best place to send it. You can find us on Twitter at FTRSblog. I'm at JakeGrant98. Jack is at Jack Nicholas, and you can find Section 103 there as well at Section 103. You can also find them at section103.com, as we noted, and you can find us and all of our content on Facebook at From the Rumble Seat. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at From the Rumble Seat, and you can find this podcast wherever podcasts are distributed. Please give that a rate, a like, a comment. We really do appreciate it. And until we speak again, good night, good luck, and go Jackets.